My name is Zach Arnold. I'm a Hollywood film and television editor, a documentary director, father of two, an American Ninja Warrior in training, and the creator of Optimize Yourself. For over 10 years now, I have obsessively searched for every possible way to optimize my own creative and athletic performance, and now I'm here to shorten your learning curve. Whether you're a creative professional who edits, writes, or directs, you're an entrepreneur, or even if you're a weekend warrior, I strongly believe that you can be successful without sacrificing your health or your sanity in the process. You ready? Let's design the optimized version of you. Hello and welcome to the Optimize Yourself podcast. If you're a brand new optimizer, I welcome you and I sincerely hope that you enjoy today's conversation. If you are inspired to take action after listening today, why not tell a friend about this show and help spread the love? And if you're a longtime listener and Optimizer OG, welcome back. Whether you're brand new or you're a seasoned vet, if you have just 10 seconds today, it would mean the world to me if you clicked the subscribe button in your podcast app of choice. Because the more people that subscribe, the more that iTunes and the other platforms can recognize this show, and thus the more people that you and I can inspire to step outside their comfort zones to reach their greatest potential. And now on to today's show. In my Optimizer coaching and mentorship program, I teach my students that in order to enjoy their work and not end up burning out, it is imperative that they learn how to work smarter and not harder. Most people who teach productivity are simply sharing strategies that allow people to run on the hamster wheel faster and more efficiently. I, on the other hand, prefer to teach people how to be more effective with their time and their energy, so what they have on their to-do lists actually matters. For the entire month of April, I'm going to focus on going back to the fundamentals of what it truly means to be productive by sharing numerous case studies from actual students in the program who have discovered a better way to approach their goals such that they get higher quality work done that's actually more fulfilling, but in less time. And today's conversation lays the groundwork for approaching productivity from a whole different perspective. Today's guest, Tamara Torres, is the founder of Optima Results Coaching, and I swear to God, the name similarity is all coincidence. And in her program, she teaches practical solutions to improve habits, increase productivity, and create more time and energy for what matters most. Her background in psychology, integrative medicine, and meditation give her a holistic approach to not only coaching her clients to successful careers, but also teaching them how they can build more fulfilling, well-balanced lives beyond just their jobs. In our conversation, Tamara shares her insights and strategies so you can align your values with your time and explains how they are ultimately much more connected to your productivity than your apps, your to-do lists, or your calendar. And as an added bonus, you're going to hear her turn the tables when she puts me on the hot seat. I share how my habit of always searching for a better way has led to great success, but also to great detriment. Tamara offers her analysis and some important questions that I need to personally consider so I can more accurately align my exceedingly high expectations with reality. If you are looking for a better way to manage your day, your energy, and your life to find a version of productivity that works for you, this is the place to begin. If today's interview inspires you to take the first step towards designing a more fulfilling career path that not only aligns you with work you're passionate about, but also includes some semblance of work-life balance, and especially if you would like the support, mentorship, and the community that can help you turn your goals into a reality, I'm excited to announce that the spring semester of my Optimizer coaching and mentorship program will be opening soon. To learn more about the program and all that it has to offer and how it can help you achieve your most important goals without sacrificing your sanity in the process, you can get on the waitlist and apply by simply visiting optimizeyourself.me/optimizer. Please keep in mind that I review applications in the order that I receive them, and I fill slots accordingly. So the earlier that you apply, the better your chances of getting into the program. All right, without further ado, my conversation with Tamara Torres, made possible today by our amazing sponsors, Evercast and ErgoDriven, who are going to be featured just a bit later in today's interview. To access the show notes for this and all previous episodes, as well as to subscribe so you don't miss the next inspirational interview, please visit optimizeyourself.me/podcast. I'm here today with Tamara Torres, who is a productivity coach who helps busy professionals and entrepreneurs achieve success. And this is a huge, huge component of why you are on my show today. It's without sacrificing balance. The B word. We're going to talk a lot about that today. So Tamara, it is a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Zach. I'm so excited to be here.
Well, as I was telling you a little bit before we started to officially record, I found you, or I should say more specifically, my team member found you in a Facebook group called Happier in Hollywood that is based off of another podcast that's hosted by Liz Craft, who happens to be the sister of Gretchen Rubin. And anybody that listens to my show knows that I'm a huge fan of Gretchen Rubin, and I talk about the 4 tendencies way more than I should have. But when my team member Debbie brought you to the table, I'm like, another productivity person, huh? Like, all right. I mean, I guess I'll take a look, but I wasn't that excited because most productivity people are all about getting more done, being more efficient. How do I get the most out of my calendar? What's the best to-do list app? And how do I get better at calendars and Trello and this and that? And listen, I love all the shiny objects. But at the end of the day, what I tell people in my program, and I think there's so much alignment between us, I tell them, I don't want to teach you how to run on a hamster wheel faster. I'm not interested in that. I want you to be able to get the most out of your time and align it with the things that are important to you without burning out. Because I am just the quintessential, I have burned out person many, many, many times, learned those lessons, continually learning them every single day. And as soon as I heard about this idea of productivity with heart, I was like, oh, okay. Now my ears are perked up and I want to learn more. And as soon as I started to dig a little deeper, I was like, man, this person is perfect. So I'm very excited to have you on the show for that reason. One quick thing that I want to mention to the audience before we go further is you don't specifically work in Hollywood and you work primarily with entrepreneurs. But I don't want anybody listening to think, oh, well, I don't know if that really applies to me then because I'm not an entrepreneur. My rebuttal is you are. Even if you are a freelancer that moves from one show to the next show to the next show, you still have a business. You're the CEO of that business, and that business is you. You have to have a brand. You have to manage your own time. You have to manage your expectations and manage where you're going to put your energy and your attention. So even though you might seemingly be in a different space, I want to let everybody know all of this stuff is going to apply to what you might want to accomplish next. So all that having been said, where I would actually like to start is better understanding how you became a productivity coach, given that your background and your formal education is about as far away from teaching productivity as possible. So help us get to know a little bit more about you and your own journey.
Yeah, great question. So 2010, within days of finalizing my divorce, I learned that my father was diagnosed with a terminal cancer. And so I took my daughter, who was turning 3, and we moved halfway across the country to be closer to my family of origin. And I left behind a clinical practice, a great job, and had to start fresh, piecing together work to pay the bills. One of my jobs was teaching at a technical college, and I would spend days preparing and teaching lectures and nights correcting papers and exams. I was exhausted, and I didn't feel present for my daughter. And then soon after my father passed away, I joined a wellness company. So, fortunately, I was able to be there for that year and accompany him in his final days. And there's no way I could ever regret the time that we had together. But it meant, significant transitions in my life. And so when I finally landed more of a consistent full-time job, it was in the wellness industry in a coaching capacity rather than seeing patients. And I noticed that the people that I was coaching were having similar issues with work-life balance. And I decided that I needed to figure these things out for myself in addition to helping my clients. And so I devoured all the information I could on habits and productivity. And through that process of learning and trial and error, I came up with kind of my own methodology that I called the CLEAR method. And also along the way, I discovered Gretchen Rubin and her 4 tendencies. And that was an amazing framework for me. And especially looking at behavior change and how do we respond to those inner and outer expectations. And that was a real game changer that allowed me to understand people better, communicate with them differently, provide different types of resources, and help them kind of take their lives to the next level with a higher level of satisfaction and success, but also balance.
And as I understand it, you also have a background in some form of medicine, correct? That's completely unrelated to productivity and psychology. So give me a little bit more background there, because I think there's a lot more synergy than people might see if they were to just look at like a LinkedIn resume.
Sure. So my bachelor's is in psychology, and then I have a doctorate of naturopathic medicine, which is basically integrative medicine. In California, there's lots of naturopathic doctors that practice. It's a 4-year degree with a mix, like conventional medical school, of first couple years of in-class training and last couple years of clinical. But in addition to learning all the conventional diagnostics and lab studies and all of that, we also learn advanced nutrition and botanical medicine and acupuncture and a little extra counseling or psychology, physical manipulation, homeopathy, just like a whole nother set of skills. And so after I finished school, I ended up doing primary care and family medicine in a clinic in Phoenix for a couple of years before I moved to Minneapolis. And I think where the synergy comes in is really looking at people holistically.
And that's one of the things that I definitely want to get into in a second, because I've had numerous conversations with some of the world's foremost experts, specifically in integrative medicine. I'm a student of it. I'm a patient of it. It's the reason that I'm here today and still, number one, functioning as a human being, but number two, functioning at a very high level as a human being is because of my love of integrative medicine. But I just want to step in with the elephant in the room for those that don't really understand the terms and they hear homeopathic and naturopathic. Oh, so you're like one of those people that treats people with like incense and magic crystals, right? Like that's what this is all about. Like, come on.
Well, unfortunately, there are people that call themselves naturopaths that got like an online certificate. Fortunately, there are, I think, 4 or 5 accredited universities in the US and a couple more in Canada that actually provide a 4-year doctorate training with the clinical rotations and meeting all of the requirements. We pass boards. So it's not so much crystals and incense, but definitely we can include some aromatherapy. But I think a lot of people have that misconception that naturopathic doctors don't have a high level of training. And actually, around 100 years ago, there were more homeopathic hospitals and clinics and universities. They just kind of fell by the wayside with the advent of things like penicillin and other antibiotics and more increase in pharmacology and things like that, where people started to move towards quick fixes or more Band-Aid solutions rather than looking at the root of the problem. And I think now in medicine, we're going back to the source. And a lot of conventional or what's called allopathic providers are looking more at how do we treat the whole person? How do we listen to our patients? And how do we look at everything that's happening within the body physically and mentally and treat the root cause rather than applying Band-Aid solutions?
And that's exactly where I wanted to go next. I have no intention of talking about integrative medicine, naturopathic medicine, aromatherapy sounds great. Probably not going to talk too much about it here, but you've been trained at a very high level to learn how to look at something holistically and find the root cause and not just treat the symptom. And if we were talking about medicine, Western medicine is very much about here's the issue, here's the disease. It's my job to make you not sick. Here's a quick solution. And integrative medicine is so much more about let's look at the whole person and understand lifestyle and behavior and psychology. And all of that training, I would believe, applies equally as well to now teaching people productivity, does it not?
Yeah, absolutely. I think especially with my approach of not just looking at where your time is going, but why and what's really important. So I talk about productivity with heart, and the first step being that values clarification. And, whether you feel like your top values are family or health, or, maybe it's financial security, in which case maybe spending a lot of time working really does align with your values. And maybe that's what provides a lot of satisfaction. Or creativity could be a huge value for people in Hollywood. And doing the work that you do provides a tremendous amount of satisfaction. So as a coach, I'm not here to pass judgment or say what I think people's values should be. It's like, this is very individual. I want you to better clarify what those values are. And then if you look at your calendar, you look at your day-to-day or week-to-week schedule, and those values aren't presenting themselves somewhere, then there's a mismatch. And we need to bring those things into alignment, where either you're realizing like, maybe the exercise and the gym workout wasn't as important as I thought, or you're saying, no, my health needs to come first, and I need to be able to better prioritize that. And, same applies to whether it be family or community service, whatever that primary value is to you, or set of values.
Yeah, I think a big aha moment for me in my own journey, because like you, and I think like many people that end up where we end up becoming coaches, whether you want to call it a life coach or a career coach or productivity coach, whatever it is, most people don't get out of college and say, this is going to be my career path. We all go through hell in our own form. And then we start to come out of it and we learn all these new things. And the first reaction is, oh my God, I wish I had known this. I want to tell other people this stuff. And a really big aha moment for me was very similar to what you said, is this idea of, are my values on my calendar? Because there are certain things I believe about myself as a person, they're not showing up in my day-to-day. And that misalignment was creating so much friction and stress, and ultimately led to burnout, because I thought I was a family man, or I thought that I was prioritizing relationships. And I realized that all I did was work all the time. And I was working on things that I wasn't passionate about, but man, did they pay well, and they were good credits on the resume. But it got to the point where it just didn't matter. And that aha moment was big for me. So let's go even a little bit deeper into this concept of getting values on the calendar and making sure they're in alignment. Because without that, you're just a more efficient version of busy.
Yeah. So I think once people figure out what their top priorities are, let's say, for example, it's family time, but you're consistently working through what could be family dinner time, or maybe you're just stepping away from your computer for 20 minutes to have a brief moment of FaceTime with your family at the dinner table before kind of dragging yourself back to the computer and diving back into work. I think sometimes work is an escape from other things that we don't want to be dealing with. And it's not a healthy escape. That's why some people are labeled workaholics. It's an addiction, and they're using it to cover up something else that's not working out. But if it's really important for you to excel at business or your work, but also be there for your family, then you have to be consistently carving out that time for your family. Most of us have that external accountability of work. We know that we're going to get the work done. But if you think about your values and priorities, that's more internal accountability or internal expectations. Nobody's necessarily holding you to those values of you're not showing metrics or KPIs. How many hours did you spend with your family this week? And without that accountability, it can be really difficult to follow through. And so for a lot of us, using our calendar can create some accountability. If we had a doctor's appointment on the calendar, we wouldn't flake out. If we told a friend that we were going to meet them for coffee at a certain time, we wouldn't miss that appointment. Or if you had an appointment with your team or your boss. So treat your family as an important stakeholder, just as you would any of these other people that hold you accountable. And so if it's family dinners, maybe it's not every night. Maybe you know that you have a later work meeting one night, and maybe you negotiate with your family and say, listen, I was really hoping that maybe we could have a special Friday morning breakfast or Sunday brunch or something like that. But if you see family time on the calendar and it's that placeholder, then you need to negotiate and figure out, if this doesn't happen tonight, when can it happen? And so there needs to be some flexibility as well, but just having it on the calendar means that there's going to be a conversation. And so I do the same thing. We have a consistent dinner time, basically 5 p.m. every day. And then we'll do family time after, which could be going for a walk or playing some games or watching a show together. And my daughter's 13. So it's myself, my partner, my daughter in the household. And we just know those are the expectations. And that's how we've created a consistent schedule that's also very intentional. Because what I'm hearing from a lot of people is that I see my family all the time, or my partner and I are both working from home. Like, why do we need to schedule time together? Like, I couldn't possibly see them more than I already do. And it's very different to see someone in passing than to say, hey, there's this new podcast. I wanted to listen to it with you tonight. Can we connect after dinner and do that together? Or can we go for a walk together? And that's intentional. And that intention needs to be there. And then that means we've cleared our schedule. We've mentally, cleared what's ever on our mind, and we can be present with our family and connect in those moments.
Yeah, I think that the word presence is so important. And what we're talking about is the difference between quantity and quality. Oh, I already spend all this time. Yeah, but is it good time? Is it I'm sitting on the same couch as my family, but we're all on our phones and our laptops? Or is everything turned off and we're playing a game? And there's a really important point that you brought up that might get lost on some of my listeners, because you use the term KPI. And a lot of my listeners are like, what the hell is a KPI? KPI is such an entrepreneur-y term, stands for key performance indicator. So you can measure things. What's my website conversion rate? What's my monthly recurring revenue, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And going back to this idea of calendars, one of the things that I do in my program, and I'm assuming you probably have something similar, I teach my students how to turn their calendar into a budget. I ask them to go through and look at all 24 hours and all 7 days, and they need to give me the budget for their life. How much are you putting towards sleep? How much you're putting towards exercise? How much is with family? How much is with work? And that allows them to get a more holistic picture of, does this align with my values? And I didn't even think about what to do with my time, because I'm sure with you as well, a client will show me their calendar. It has one blue block Friday at 4 p.m. Well, that's a doctor's appointment. I'm like, that's it? That's the only thing on your calendar? And I'm guessing you've experienced the same.
Yeah, I actually recommend that my clients do a time audit where they're tracking 24/7 for 1 or ideally 2 weeks at the very least, so that they can really see where their time is going. The app that I like to use for that is Toggle. And a lot of people will also use it if they're doing billable hours. So they want to know exactly, how much time is being spent on this project or this account. And then, it's really eye-opening to see wow, it looks like I actually spent 20 hours last week watching TV, and I didn't think I had that much time. And if you're in the television industry, well, maybe that's a good use of your time, because it might be doing some research, or maybe you tell yourself that, and maybe you don't need to do 2 hours in order to do some research. But I think it can be very eye-opening once you start to do the tracking, and then you can start to shift. It's does this align with my priorities? It looks like I didn't have a single hour of time one-on-one with my partner last week. Is that really conducive to having a healthy and happy relationship? Probably not for most of us. So I have people do it, in the moment. And I go back and forth between having people schedule everything on their calendars versus not. And I think a lot of it depends on just the individual and what works for them. If you can proactively calendar and schedule everything, like my calendar is my to-do list. So the things that I want to do are showing up in my calendar at the time that's most conducive to doing them. But I think we also find that it's pretty hard to 100% stick to something, knowing that tasks can take longer or other things can come up. But the more we plan, the more likely we are to follow through and get more done. And then the idea at the end of the day is that so that you can close down your laptop and then connect with your family, make time for relationships and self-care, which is just as important. Because if we're not recharging our own batteries, then what do we have to give the next day? at work or for our families or ourselves.
You had me at my calendar is my to-do list.
Yeah.
As soon as you said that, I'm like, oh yeah, you and I are kindred spirits, because I have an entire lesson that's called that. And boy, does that freak out creative people. As soon as they know that they have to schedule their time, but you don't understand. I need to work when the creativity strikes, when inspiration strikes. It's like, for me, creativity strikes about 8 a.m. every single morning because I don't give myself any other choice. What I have found with my clientele, and I'm guessing you found the same, is for people that are really against this idea of calendaring because they want to be free, they always tell me the same thing. I have so much freedom because I'm now using my calendar. It's the craziest paradox. Have you experienced that as well?
Well, I'm an upholder. And so my motto is discipline is my freedom. And it was a game changer for me to realize that not everybody thinks like me and not everybody operates like me.
Frankly, just about everybody else doesn't operate like you. You're very much in the minority, myself included, because I'm the vicious combination of questioner and rebel. One of the reasons I have the podcast, and I go against the grain, asking questions to do everything that other people are not doing, right? But upholder, I can see how the calendar and the discipline would be your freedom.
Yeah, it works really well for me, but I had to understand that different things work for different people. And most people do not want or need as much structure as I want and need. My partner's a rebel. So getting him to calendar things is really difficult, but I understand that appealing to his identity is the key strategy for rebels. So when it comes to appealing to his desire to be a good parent or a good partner, he is all on board. And so he's accepted the fact that there are going to be some date nights on our calendar or some family times or family walks on the calendar. And as much as he initially resisted, I think he's really seen the benefit.
Well, as a questioner and a rebel, I can tell you I hated the idea. Like, just the mere thought of my calendar telling me what to do, and not only telling me what to do, but all day long. Like, no way was that going to work for me, because I was Mr. Creativity when inspiration struck. And that was at 8 p.m. some nights, 9 p.m. other nights. And it was just go with the flow and work for hours and hours and hours and go back and do it the next day until I completely burned out. But then I started to realize that, like you said, going back to identity, my identity was that I want to create work that impacts others and do it successfully. And I realized that as somebody that was diagnosed with adult onset ADD, I couldn't do that anymore without structure. And that's when the calendar created freedom for me, because as soon as I was done with things, I could disconnect and I could unwind, which I couldn't do before, because 24/7 I had to be achieving the next thing. And I still struggle with that to this day. I didn't say I'm a recovered workaholic. I'm a recovering workaholic, and it will be a perpetual process. But I find that if it's on the calendar and I get it done, it's so much easier to say, all right, I'm out for the day. I did what I could do. Now I can disconnect and be present.
Absolutely. Yeah. So for the rebel in you, the calendar allowed you to be your best self, and which is aligned with your identity, to be creative, to be present for your family. And as long as that makes sense to you as a questioner, that makes sense. There's a good reason to do this. And it also creates that freedom for you at the end of the day. So lots of rebels will say, yeah, I'm willing to do this, this, and this. And I know the sooner that I get this done, then the sooner I have the opportunity to do this other stuff that I also love.
So where I want to go a little bit deeper now, again, is this idea of presence, because I really want to redefine what productivity means. I think productivity is very individual, but we have this collective feeling as a society that productivity is just getting more things done. And he who has the most accomplishments and the most crossed off of their to-do list when they die wins. I'm not a believer in that at all. I'm all about presence. And there's something that you said in another interview that I listened to where, again, I said, oh yeah, you and I are cut from the same cloth. You said that balance is something you practice. It's not something you attain, which is very similar to what I tell my students. I don't want you to work towards work-life balance and think that it's this 50-50 scale. I want you to work towards work-life presence, where you're equally present with your work, equally present with your spouse or your partner or your kids or your hobbies or your passions, but it's this thing that you have to constantly work towards. So talk to me a little bit more about this idea of balance is not something that you can attain.
Sure. So I think one thing that I found for myself a couple of years ago was that it was really helpful for me to start my day very intentionally. So I would get out of bed and start my day with a meditation practice and kind of some intention setting and think about what's involved in my day ahead and what kinds of meetings or interactions do I have, what parts of myself do I need to bring to the table in these different situations, and what's really important. And over, the two things that would come up were presence and connection. And the way I see that is, during my workday, I want to have the presence so I can do my work and be focused. And then also my presence to connect with my clients and the people that I serve. And at the end of the day, I want to have that same presence for that same connection, but it's going to be with my family, with my friends, with my loved ones. And I like how on Happier in Hollywood, they talk about sometimes we have seasons of sacrifice. And there's going to be days or weeks or months where we cannot set aside as much time as we would ideally like to have for our families, for our relationships, or for our self-care. But these need to be kind of finite periods of time. If you find that you're stuck in a job where 24/7, you are thinking about work, you're breathing work, and you can't escape it, and this is going on consistently for months, something has to give. And if you don't put the brakes on, your body will. Your health will start to decline. You're going to notice that your performance is going to suffer. You're going to be exhausted. You're going to be irritable, and you're probably not going to do your best work. And that's sometimes people need to have a wake-up call before they can actually put their foot down. And I know that when it comes to production with movies and things like that, things are going to be really intense and fast-paced during periods of time. And then there might be times where you're working very little, depending on where the cycle is in the project or what your role is. And so I think that's where the idea of, in terms of balance, trying to balance, being in that state of balancing, but it's not something we ever completely achieve. And sometimes balance means, well, work's going to be a little bit more of a priority during this period of time. And then when I have more downtime, then, it's going to be a lot more family centered. And the more flexible we can be, kind of like a strong willow tree, the less likely we are to topple.
And I think one of the most important parts of actually being able to make this balance happen on a recurring, regular basis is you have to be really good at helping others set proper expectations, just like you set your own expectations, talking about these tendencies. And an example would be, for me, the difference between work-life balance and work-life presence is, well, I can only work 40 hours a week because I need to make sure that my family gets 40 hours a week, as opposed to, well, I'm working on Cobra Kai right now and I'm in the trenches, but I've communicated to my family, this is going to be a really tough month. But just know that when I get through this month, there's a whole wide open space on my calendar and we're going to plan a trip and we're going to do this thing for spring break. But just know right now, this is where my head is. And I didn't used to do that. I just assumed that they would figure it out and they would see what I'm busy and they wouldn't bother me. That doesn't work so well. But as soon as I communicated the expectation, I was so afraid. I remember when I took the job on Cobra Kai, the second season, and I said to my wife, like, I'm going to have a really couple tough months and I was really nervous. And she's like, what's the big deal? Like, we've been through this before. Just let me know. Just talk to me about it and we will figure it out. And that communication and setting the expectations has made all the difference in the world. The work is still hard, but there's so much less friction and stress behind it.
I agree. Yeah, having that communication and setting the expectations is really important. I think it can be harder to create those boundaries when we're working from home, or right now we're effectively living at work. If your computer is in your home office, which might be in your living room or kitchen or even your bedroom, and it can be really hard to step away and for the work life to not feel pervasive. You might, pass by your laptop when you're technically considering yourself off the clock. And just having that visual can kind of seep into your psyche and the rest of the day. So I really encourage people to find ways to set limits by, if you have to set an out of office reminder, just so people know that you're not answering your email right now and you'll get to it at a reasonable time the next day. That can be really helpful. We used to have our commutes as a buffer at the end of our day, and we have some time to decompress. And if you're just like walking out of your home office into the living room with your family, that can be a difficult transition. So if you can create some sort of ritual, like I have a coaching colleague, he and his wife at 5:00, they do a dance party. And they just like dance out. They're both working from home, but this is like symbolic of our workday is done, and now we can have fun, and now we can connect. Other people have told me they'll leave the house and take a couple laps around the block. It's like they've created their own commute, or hop on the elliptical and do a little bit of exercise. So something that can put a pause and time and space between you and the work that's ending and the transition to home life is really helpful. And if you can like turn off your computer or put away your computer, you don't want to have it visually interfering with you being present for everything else that's important the rest of the evening.
First of all, the fact that you even said, wait, I cannot respond to my email. Oh my God, that's terrifying. I can do that? You mean I don't have to respond at 1 a.m. and get them what they need at 2:30 a.m. just because I'm home and my computer is down the hall? Like, that seems insane. How dare you? But here's the second thing I want to bring up, and I know that my audience is thinking this right now. You said it twice, this idea of disconnecting at 5 p.m. And the response from my audience is, 5 p.m. That's the middle of the day in Hollywood. Are you insane? Not possible. So for those that are not entrepreneurs that can manage their own schedule and work from home, when it is about being in an office or virtually being in an office or being on a set, I think it's even more important to learn work-life presence versus the balancing of the numbers, because most people, best case scenario, are done at 7 or 8 p.m. as opposed to 5 p.m.
And there's still different ways that you can have flexibility within that. So yes, I work more of a traditional 9 to 5, except for 2 nights a week. I work until 8:30 and 7:30. And that's when I have evening clients. But then I have my mornings free to do other things. And so if you know that you need to consistently be working until 7 or 8, then maybe you're building in some other time in your day. If you're single and it's just about making time for yourself, maybe you're doing that in the morning, or maybe you're taking a longer lunch. There's nothing saying that everybody should live a 9 to 5 schedule if that's not what your work environment really demands. However, I don't think that we should glorify this exhaustion and wear it as a badge of honor because we're working 60, 80 hours. Most of us cannot be that productive and produce really good work 60, 80 hours a week consistently. And so I know you talk about working smarter and not harder. So how do we take consistent breaks? How do we make time for self-care, get the nutrition that we need, the sleep, the exercise, the time to connect? All of these things are really important. I also talk to people that have young kids, and maybe they really want to get their kids down to sleep at 8:00 and be available to read a bedtime story and all of that. Then make that a priority. And if you find that you have to log in later, then that's okay. Don't feel guilty about it. But maybe that means that you're starting your workday later. So there's nothing saying that we have to have this 9 to 5 time frame. If you're familiar with Laura Vanderkam, who writes a lot about time tracking, and she wrote a book called I Know How She Does It, I think is what it's called. And she did time studies with over 100 female executives that had children. So, the whole myth of women can't have it all. You can't be an executive and have kids and make over $100,000 and, be in the C-suite and be successful, quote unquote. And looking at these women's time logs, she found that they have figured out ways to be very consistent and also flexible at the same time. So some of the commonalities were that these women often front loaded their work, where they're doing more work Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and less work Thursday and Friday. Maybe they're traveling for work and those would be their travel days, but then they're only working half days on Thursday and Friday. Or maybe they're leaving work at 3 p.m. to pick up kids, and then they're logging back in 2 or 3 hours at night. And the idea is, don't feel guilty about having to log in at night, especially if that afforded you an opportunity to prioritize time with your kids and your family while everybody is awake. And so it's more about how can you be flexible and not try to follow the standards or the should or the expectations of other people, being clear about what you expect for yourself. And like you said, communicating that with your family.
And all of that sounds great if I have control over my time and I can maintain the flexibility. But what if I'm working in the Hollywood machine that does expect me to wear my exhaustion, sleep deprivation badge of honor, not just on my sleeve, but tattooed on my forehead? It's the first thing I'm going to say to everybody every day. Oh man, I was here so late last night. How about you? I didn't even go home. I slept on my couch. Good for you, man. First of all, I'm over it. And everybody that listens to the show knows that I'm over it. But I think a lot of people are going to come back to what you said and say, but I can't have that flexibility. I can't do that with the way that my job is structured. So I have a response for them, but I'm curious what your response would be. My sincerest apologies for the interruption in the middle of this interview. But if you are a content creator or you work in the entertainment industry, not only is the following promo not an interruption, but listening has the potential to change your life, because collaborating with Evercast is that powerful. Here's a brief excerpt from a recent interview that I did with Evercast co-founders Brad Thomas and award-winning editor Roger Barton.
Living this lifestyle of a feature film editor has really had an impact on me. So I was really looking for something to push back against all of these lifestyle infringements that are imposed on us, both by schedules and expectations. When you guys demoed Evercast for me that first time, my jaw hit the floor. I'm like, oh my God, this is what I have been waiting for a decade.
I also had the same reaction when I first saw Evercast. 2 words came to mind: game changer.
Our goal, honestly, is to become the Zoom for creatives, whatever it is you're streaming, whether it's editorial, visual effects, Pro Tools for music composition, live shot cameras. It's consistent, audio and video, lip sync, always stays in sync. Whether you're in a live session where you're getting that feedback immediately, or you can't get it immediately, so you record the session and you can share those clips with people on the production team where there's no room for any confusion. It's like, this is exactly what the director wants. This is exactly what the producer wants.
What matters most to me is it makes the entire process more efficient, which then translates to us as creatives who spend way too much time in front of computers. We get to shut it down and we get to go spend time with our friends and family.
The biggest complaint, and I'm sure you guys have heard this many, many times, this looks amazing, I just can't afford it.
Tesla had to release the Model S before they released the Model 3. So by the end of the year, we are going to be releasing a sub $200 version a month of Evercast for the freelancer and indie creatives. Anyone who is a professional video creator outside of Hollywood.
I think what we've learned over the last few months is that this technology can translate to better lives for all of us, that give us more flexibility and control while still maintaining the creativity, the creative momentum, and the quality of work.
I cannot stress this enough. Evercast is changing the way that we collaborate. If you value your craft, your well-being, and spending quality time with the ones you love, Evercast now makes that possible for you and me. To listen to the full interview and learn about the amazing potential that Evercast has to change the way that you work and live, visit optimizeyourself.me/Evercast. Now back to today's interview.
Well, I think the culture is shifting. And I think in a world now where most of us are forced to work from home, people are seeing more of the value of creating some balance and having some flexibility and adjusting expectations. And so I think there is perhaps less of that pride on the exhaustion. We don't have the same expectation of FaceTime. It used to be like, the person who stays in the office until 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock at night, or the person that's there first thing in the morning, like those are the ones that are the hard workers and the ones that get promoted. And I think now we have a better understanding that there can be a lot of flexibility And, if you're not a morning person, don't try to get to yourself to work at 7 a.m. or start your workday at 7 a.m. There's actually something called a chronotype, which means like we have our own types. Some of us are naturally morning birds, and some of us are actually night owls. And that was survival for our tribes, eons ago, when they actually needed someone who was a natural night owl to stay up and protect the families, the community. And so there's a real reason why some of us are built different, and you shouldn't try to put yourself in that box. And so if you're a night owl and you're trying to be available from 6 a.m. and then, continue to do your work until midnight, like that's a recipe for burnout. But I've also listened to some of your podcasts, and I know that you are like the health and fitness person in the teams that you work with. And I would love to hear how you've been able to say like, no, this isn't the way to go. And I'm not going to succumb to this peer pressure of working myself to exhaustion. And I'm going to continue to put my own health and my self-care first. So I'm going to turn it around and see how you've been able to make that happen in Hollywood.
I love that you did that, because I actually was going to turn the podcast on myself anyway. So it's funny that you did that. You and I we're totally on the same page. I think that it's easier said than done until you have a certain level of success. When I was younger, I didn't do that. I wasn't Mr. Health and Fitness. I did wear the exhaustion badge on my forehead. I was the first in and I was the last out every day, and I could work anybody into the ground. I grew up on a farm in northern Wisconsin, so we have that Midwestern work ethic between us. So when I came to California and all these what people where I grew up would call the city kids, right? I'm like, oh my God, I can work these people into the ground. And I did, until I was acquainted with burnout and depression and suicidal depression and massive, like debilitating anxiety, to the point of my girlfriend at the time, now my wife, said, do you mind taking out the trash? And I broke down in tears because it was too overwhelming to do. So the short answer is I didn't used to do it the way that I'm doing it now. But what I've learned is that if you can back up your expectation of, I want to put my health first, I want to prioritize sleep, if you can back it up with really good work, it's a lot easier to make that sell. So with Cobra Kai, for example, really difficult show, really time consuming. But on average, I've now been on the show for 2.5 seasons. I don't work more than 8 hours a day. And that's not because it's an easy show. It's because I've learned how to better manage my time. And not only manage my time, but manage my energy, which is largely based on understanding my chronotype. So I love that you brought up chronotypes, because that's another thing that I want people to understand about productivity. It's not just time management, it's energy management. And I was always working at the wrong time of day. I mean, like when I look back, if I had tracked the calendar a decade ago, it's like, what was I thinking? I was doing all the wrong things, until I realized that there are certain times of day that I'm super productive and other times of day I'm useless. To this day, that's true. Everybody thinks that I'm, burning it 24/7. Like, oh no, I've got a window of about 5 or 6 hours where I crush it. The other 18 hours of the day, I am a heap of dirty laundry. I just do not get a whole lot done. And I spend every single day watching TV for 1 to 2 hours, either research or spending time with family, because my son loves TV. So that's intentional time. Every day at about 7:30 or 8, hey, Dad, you want to watch another episode of this show? That's really important to him, and he looks forward to it. And it's just me sitting around and doing nothing, but I'm doing it intentionally. But what I will and this is a really big thing that I impart on my students and my clients that I want to share, is I think the number one kind of piece that brings it all together is setting expectations. When I take a job, I make it very clear that I'm not going to be there 24/7. So in my meeting for Cobra Kai, which I had set up because I found the show and I wanted to work on it, and I knew that it was my dream show, I was willing to say no if they wanted me available 24/7. So I asked them right in the interview, like, what are your expectations? What's your workflow? Do you guys just want to send me notes at 9 p.m. and expect I'm going to turn around by the next morning? Like, am I going to be able to go see my kids' spring recital if I need to take a morning off? And I wanted to gauge what their reaction was. And if you see this friction and this anxiety, like, well, aren't you going to be totally dedicated to helping us create our vision? That's no longer a good fit for me, because I've been in that environment. So I make sure before I take a gig, I've set the expectation that if you want me, you're going to get the best of me, but it's not going to be in quantity of time, it's in quality of time. to this day, nobody has ever objected to the very few hours that I work because I meet my deadlines and the work is at or above expectation, usually above. But that's what it takes to prioritize that health and fitness, is you have to be willing to say no to things that don't align with it.
Yeah, it sounds like you've been really able to advocate for yourself and your priorities. And I agree, sometimes you do have to be at a certain level in your career in order to be able to do that. And so when I first started coaching, I thought I would be working more with women in their 30s, 40s, 50s, maybe older kids or more established in their careers. And I found that I was talking to a lot of mostly women in their 20s and 30s who are super focused on their career trajectory. You know, they may or may not be partnered yet. They're not even thinking about having kids yet. They're just like, you know, and in the grind and like, how do I get up to the top? Like, how do I just do everything I need to do in order to show myself and, compete against everybody else and get to where I want to be so that eventually I can take a breath and slow down. And, you know, unfortunately, sometimes you do have to put a lot of front end work in order to get to the status where you have enough power to kind of advocate for yourself. And you're able to bargain a little bit more. It's like if they want you badly enough, then they're going to say, okay, yeah, that we can do that. But I think you're also right in terms of doing your best work, finding out the time of day that works best for you to do that work. Because I want to say maybe it's Parkinson's law or something like that, that the work will expand to fill the time that we have. And so if you give yourself 8 hours to do a task, it will take 8 hours. But if you give yourself 4 hours to do a task, and sometimes for question artists, it's really helpful to be like time limited. You're going to spend this much time. You're not going to continue to do all these kinds of research because you have 4 hours to knock this out. And you can do some really solid quality work during that period of time. And so I'm a big advocate of not just time blocking, but like consistent breaks, doing like a modified Pomodoro. For me, it's 50 minutes of focus and 10 minutes of break. That's worked really well for me because I know if I think about, I want to add something to my Amazon cart, or I want to check my email, or, check what's going on here and there in social media. Look, I have 20 minutes left in my Pomodoro, so let me just continue to stay focused. And when that time's up, then if I want, I can take a look at these things. Usually the urge has passed, so I'm less likely to look at it anyways. And then when it's break time, great, I'm going to go to the living room and visit with my cats. And I'm going to grab some tea. Maybe I'll even go outside and get a little bit of fresh air. And then I'm refreshed and I can go back to my segments of focus time. And so one of the strategies that I recommend for people is if you can identify the times that work best for you, if you can block it out on your calendar. I know not everybody's calendar is respected and we don't always have full control over the calendars. But for me, that means getting up before everybody else, or because I'm a morning person, or getting some work done because I'm an entrepreneur and I also work in the corporate world. I'm logging in to do my private coaching business stuff before I'm logging in for my corporate work. And that works really well for me. I'm getting a lot of stuff done before my family wakes up. And then after dinner, it's time to wind down. I mean, maybe we are going to watch an episode of Cobra Kai together. As you know, we're already caught up. So we're just waiting for the next season.
As you should be, by the way, as you should be.
Yeah, I think we binged that fairly quickly because we could not wait for it when it came out in January. And we haven't found anything else to watch since. Honestly, we're always struggling. Like, what are we going to watch for family movie night? We're usually going to some old classics, like rewatching actually Karate Kid and stuff like that. But in terms of, in the evening time, because I was able to get a lot done during the day, I don't have any sense of guilt to spend time with my family, play some cards, go for a walk, or watch a movie, watch some TV, just relax and hang out. And because I hold myself to such high standards, and because as an entrepreneur, we could literally work all the time, I have to set limits for myself And I've also shared these limits with my family. So it's like after dinner, unless I have this crazy project deadline, I'm really probably not going to log into my computer. I'm not going to look at work stuff. And I'm going to do some pleasure reading. I'm going to do some yoga, just quality time with my family or downtime for myself. And setting those limits for myself has helped me to resist the urge to go back to work. And that's been really helpful. I also recommend having some kind of like a Sabbath where at least 24 hours in your week, you are taking some time off. So, Friday night is when we do like our family takeout, and that's just kind of a fun way for us to end the week. I might log back into work and write a blog or, take care of some business expenses or finances Saturday morning. And then by the time my family's up, we're doing activities outside. And then Sunday, I probably won't do any work until maybe the evening where I'm starting to think about what are my appointments on the calendar? What do I need to get ready for the day? But a lot of weekends, like from midday Saturday to almost Sunday evening, I can be completely offline. And sometimes I'll forget where my phone is, which can be annoying for people, like at least my friends who are trying to get a hold of me. But I feel free to do that. And I've also had that pattern and set those expectations. And so people kind of know that's where I'm at.
Well, I got to say that as a disciplined upholder that's a morning person, must be nice. That sounds so much fun. Man, that just must be so simple. Because I'm a questioner rebel that my chronotype by default is a night owl. So I was just a mess of productivity, doing all the things at all the wrong times, like I said. But again, I felt...
for who? Because you can be super productive after hours. And maybe that's after your kids go to bed. Doesn't that work for you?
I've now since switched I don't want to say I've switched my chronotype, but I've been able to shift my circadian rhythms because it wasn't in alignment with both my family's needs, my clients' needs, and the needs of my job. So I've had to learn how to shift all of those things.
That's hard.
But even before I knew anything about upholder versus questioner versus obliger versus rebel, and for anybody that's like, what are they talking about? I probably should have said earlier, listen to my podcast with Gretchen Rubin. We're going to put it in big, bold letters and stars and asterisks and all kinds of emojis so you find it. It is required listening for anybody that wants to learn more about themselves and about productivity. But I found that I would spend all day long doing nothing out of, number one, fear, procrastination, or exhaustion. So I would spend all day long in my office. This was when I was editing the TV show Burnout. It was my first really big gig in television. It was my big break, my career changer. And I show up, I couldn't do anything because this sense of perfectionism that I had to reach. In my mind, my expectation of perfectionism had to be reached. I just had my first kid and I was exhausted all day long. And the only thing that got me to do good work was the fear of getting fired if I didn't meet my deadlines. So I would do nothing for days, and then I would let the work pile up. And starting about 8 p.m. when I got home, 8 p.m. to midnight, I would just go, like just the craziest levels of deep focus and flow. And that worked, but it wasn't a long-term solution. That's when I realized I had to figure out how to rewire all of this. So it was just kind of the perfect storm of doing all the things the wrong way until I figured out, how do I get all these expectations to align?
Yeah, well, it sounds like you've had a lot of insights and you figured out how to make things more sustainable for you.
Let me put it this way. I'm going to stop you there because it's the perfect segue. I'm figuring it out. To say that I have figured it out would be a vast overstatement. And I say that because one of the things that I wanted to do fairly quickly, I always like to put people on the hot seat to really dive into deeper topics. And I want to put myself on the hot seat, which I don't do often. But here's why. I think that you're wired very similar to me, and I have a sense that you're very honest and open with people. And I want to share with you where I'm stuck right now. And it's the way that I've been wired my whole life. And once again, I'm recognizing if this is something that I don't really curb and get in check, it could lead to bigger issues. One of the things that I talk about very often that I believe is the absolute root cause of burnout, as we've been talking about, is setting improper expectations. Just because I'm more productive and I'm better at managing my time and I've learned deep focus and flow, the problem doesn't go away for being a recovering workaholic. And the problem for me is learning how to set realistic expectations. So let me give you a picture of what's going on in my life as we speak. And what I need to learn is how to be okay with not meeting all of these expectations. So number one, as you already know, I'm editing 4 episodes of a 10-episode season of Cobra Kai, literally as we speak, double checking to make sure I don't have a producer looking for me on Slack while recording. So that's one thing I'm doing, which for most, that's a lot. That's kind of it. That's all consuming. Cobra Kai is my side hustle. So beyond that, I also have 2 kids. And of course, those kids are home and they're being homeschooled. And I'm doing my best to help them with the math homework or, the piano homework. And I think twice while we've been recording, 1, I heard my daughter screaming at my son. Hopefully the mic didn't pick that up. And number 2, she was knocking on the door looking for me. So that's another area. And I'm doing my best to be a present father and watch TV with my son every evening and make sure that I can go to any and all of the events and be around during the weekends. So that's another area. Another part of it is that I'm running, not currently, but I have a fully fledged coaching practice. And right now I have like 72 active clients of a pool of several hundred. And those active clients are people that I work with for 2 to 3 mornings every single week. So I start my week, I coach, I work with people one-on-one, small groups, I mentor them, I help them through these major career transitions. Then I take that hat off, then I put the Cobra Kai hat on. But wait, there's more. If you've listened to the show, you may already know this, but I've spent the last 3 years training to be on American Ninja Warrior.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And I got on the show. And as of people listening to this, this will have happened in the past, but as of you recording this live, I'm going to be running the course in front of an entire TV crew in about 11 days.
Oh my goodness. Wow. That's great news. I didn't realize that. That's a huge accomplishment.
I've mentioned it in a it's not something that I've kept private, but it's not something that I'm like screaming from the rooftops either. But the point being, that's what my week looks like right now, where it's a combination of making sure I'm a present father, I'm managing my 72 clients, I'm making sure that I'm meeting all my deadlines of my 4 episodes on Cobra Kai. And just yesterday, I happened to drive all around Los Angeles, having 2 different 2-hour training sessions to get ready for American Ninja Warrior. Not sustainable.
No, this sounds like a season of sacrifice.
It is. This is absolutely meat in the trenches. And it's funny, one of my favorite lines from movies, and it's one of those more obscure ones, but I picture it every day. There's a line from Home Alone 2, where Macaulay Culkin, right before the big Act 3 climax, he lifts up the brick to throw it through the window of the toy store. And he says, well, guess it's another Christmas in the trenches. And he throws the brick. And every day I'm thinking, just another day in the trenches. And that's where I am now. And again, it's not sustainable. And this is not the way my life is all the time. But as soon as I got the call from American Ninja Warrior, I'm like, all right, it's trench warfare for the next 6 weeks. But I also know that one of my tendencies, and I know that Debbie, who connected us, and anybody else on my team knows, that one of the major fallacies for me is I always set improper expectations, thinking I can accomplish more than is feasible or realistic. So on that note, what recommendations might you have?
So there's so much there. One, it sounds like this is time limited. And once you do your event, then things can relax a little bit, right? So you're on the home stretch now.
Yeah, I've got to be about a week and a half before recording the show is over. But knowing me, there's always going to be another thing. It's not like, oh, well, in 11 days, my life goes back to normal. I just fill it with another thing. And I have an editor in the business that was an assistant editor of mine for a long time. She's now made the transition. But she said to me at one point, it was when I was producing and directing a documentary film that, again, I was doing in my free time. And as soon as I finished it, even before I finished it, I started this podcast that was like 7 years ago now. And she's like, could you not just take a break? Like, can't you just not be doing 4 things at a time? And I'm like, oh, I actually can't. So I always know there's going to be something else. As soon as I'm done shooting American Ninja Warrior, I'm going to fill the gap with something else. And I'm learning, how do I be okay with not having to do that all the time?
So one of my questions is, what suffers as a result?
Suffers as a result of
having so much on your plate?
I would say that the biggest thing that suffers would be the version of me when I'm not actively turned on. When I show up at work, I'm engaged, I'm present, I'm focused. When I get on the ninja course or when I do my training, I'm there, I'm focused. But as soon as I allow myself to turn the switch off, I'm useless. Like when you had said you kind of have this one day a week that becomes a buffer, that's my Saturdays. But my Saturdays isn't energetically going to this activity or taking care of this around the house. It's just for 24 hours. And as long as I have that, I usually recover and the rest of the week is good. But what if it didn't have to be that way? What if I could have energy and not feel like I need 24 hours a day to collapse and be useless? So
it sounds to me like maybe it's worthwhile. Like everything that you're striving for, when you talked about filling this gap. Like, what is this need that you're trying to fulfill? And is all of this drive and all of this effort, is it worthwhile? And my sense is that it is, that you get so much satisfaction from the way you drive and push yourself the other 6 days of the week that it is perhaps worth the time that you need to recover. And you are already performing at the level that most people can't. You're already doing the level of work that would be equivalent to, 2 or 3 people. And if you're not satisfied with that, then you have to ask yourself, why? And at what cost would it be to yourself to drive yourself further than you are, or not allow yourself that decompression time?
That's an interesting viewpoint, because I would say that my rebuttal as of the way things are today, I'm completely satisfied with all of it. Like it is both exhausting and energizing. And when you said like doing the work of 2 or 3 people, I've said to so many people, I wouldn't wish my calendar on my worst enemy, but I love it because I'm getting so much out of everything. But at the same time, there's still a part of me, and I've actually done extensive psychoanalysis and therapy to dig into this. There's a part of me that feels like I'm never doing enough. Somebody looks at the website, the coaching program, oh, it's so amazing the impact you're having on the industry. And my first thought is, yeah, but I could be doing more. I'm not doing enough. That's the machine that drives me. And that, if I'm not very careful about that and I'm not hyper aware of that voice, that's what leads me to the path to burnout.
I think we all have that nagging should of something that should be better. We should prioritize more this as a parent. We should do this better. I really should update my website. I think that's the case for a lot of us. Like, why have I neglected my website? But it doesn't really help us to be more satisfied with our lives. And as you may have heard in that other podcast, sometimes that dissatisfaction that we feel that helps to drive us really helps us to accomplish a lot. And perhaps if you were ever to get to the point where you felt like everything was just satisfying, you would be bored and ultimately dissatisfied. So I think you are someone who needs this inherent dissatisfaction. I bet a lot of your life is very satisfying. There's just that 20% that you're continuing to push towards, because that gives you satisfaction, like not settling for less, striving for excellence. That is your MO. And you need that, and you wouldn't be who you are without that. I think it becomes problematic when we have this nagging should, like, well, why aren't I as effective on my 7th day? Or, because on the 7th day we rest. Like you need to recharge your batteries so you can continue to be effective. If there is something else happening, like, well, on that 7th day, I'm just irritable and I just binge eat and nobody wants to be around me, then that's problematic. But if it's just needing some rest, just needing some decompression, you probably just need to give yourself permission, because I think probably the rest of the world has. They probably said, Zach is doing plenty.
Well, it's funny because the what you just described is not so long ago in my past. Let's put it that way. I'm exhausted, I'm irritable, I'm binge eating, stay away from me. That's not me 10 years ago. That's probably me 1 to 2 years ago. And it was one of the areas where I probably was the most dissatisfied. But when you said 20%, I would say that number right now for me is maybe 5%. Like, how much of my life am I really dissatisfied with, and I need to make a change and I need to dig in and figure this out? It's like 5%. But what got me here is that number was like 95% about 5 years ago. And I've told this story to my audience before, and I'm not going to go into it too much, but I at least want to link to an article that I wrote that started all of this. It was called, I Was Tired of Putting My Kids to Bed Via FaceTime Every Night. And I was working on Empire at the time, which was it was the first season, #1 show, all these, breaking these huge ratings records, cultural phenomenon. And I spent months on end putting my kids to bed via FaceTime. And I was over it. And I just said, I'm so dissatisfied with getting to the rung on the ladder that I've worked so hard to get to. Who am I? I completely lost my sense of identity because my identity was completely wrapped up in my profession. I didn't have the identity or the values as being a good father. I wanted to be, but all I was working all the time. And I was really good at what I did. I knew that. I had the confidence that I'm really good at what I do. But if I take that away and I don't want to do it anymore, then who the hell am I as a human being? So I was at 95%. Now I work just as hard, but with the level of satisfaction, it's just more, man, I need some sleep, as opposed to I'm burned out and I need to totally fix my life. And I've been in both places.
Yeah, it sounds like you've made great progress. And I can see also as a rebel, how much your identity is important to you. And as a questioner, how much you seek to customize to make everything work for you. And you're doing better than 99.9% of us. So you're probably never going to be satisfied, and that's probably okay. And it's probably going to be really hard to say it's okay to not be satisfied. And you probably, nobody else can even give you permission for that because it has to come from within. But it sounds like if you are as satisfied with your life and how you're spending your time, there's maybe not a whole lot left to tweak.
Yeah, but I need something to fix. I need something to, dare I say, optimize. But it's just, this is totally going off the beaten path, but I just had the weirdest memory. It was, I think it must've been 2007 or 2008. I'd started my own business and I was in my mid to late 20s, taking out 6 figures worth of debt and buying equipment and hiring employees because I was so tired of doing things the way that people told me I had to do them. So I was going to do it differently because I'm a rebel. And it was so stressing me out, and I couldn't figure out why I was making all these decisions and how I got in this hole. And I remember my dad sitting me down because he's very much into personal development and reading about all this stuff. And he's like, what's the script? What's the thing in your head that's driving you? What, like, if you had to pick one thing that applies to everything? And I realized it was one question. There's got to be a better way. There's got to be a better way that I can do this or that or the other thing. And that, I think, has gotten me where I am, but it's also gotten me into the deepest, darkest holes because in addition to being a recovering workaholic, I'm also a recovering perfectionist. And that can be a trap that a lot of people fall into. And I think that's where I want to close it, is this idea, and this is one of the most important lessons I've learned, a lot from my ninja training, but also from all the other things I've learned about productivity and mindsets and Gretchen Rubin and all these other things, is speaking to this idea of progression, not perfection.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Gretchen Rubin would say progress over perfection. And I agree with that. It's difficult when you're a perfectionist. You want everything to be done the right way. But I think I'm a recovering perfectionist as well. And I used to have a lot of analysis paralysis because I lean questioner. And it just wasn't worth the time and energy that I was putting to try to do something just so. And I had to get to the point where it's like, this is as good as it's going to be, or it's good enough given the time that I have and the energy that makes sense to put forth with this. And it's good to have some level of dissatisfaction and continue to push ourselves, but we also need to reflect on how far we've come and what we've accomplished and what our other priorities are so that we can continue to have balance and recharge our batteries and be able to bring our best selves to the next day for our family, for ourselves, and for our work.
Yeah, I think that reflection is a big key for me. That's something that I'm always actively working on because I am always about what's next? What haven't I accomplished? And I've had to learn how to develop the skill and, more importantly, the habit of reflecting. Like, it's got to be on the calendar that I reflect on what I have gotten done. Otherwise, all I see are the tasks on the to-do list or the time blocks on the calendar that are yet to come. But then if I force myself to rifle through the last month of my time blocks, like, damn, I got some stuff done. I'm excited about that.
Yeah. And that's a great way to do that. Like I love Chris Gillibo's annual review, where you spend some time it's like a self-assessment. So you're looking at everything you accomplished. And like for me to go through my entire calendar for the year, I'm like, wow, I did, this many talks or this many events, or accomplished this and that. I created my first course online. That was amazing. Like I learned so much. And, this is what I want to be doing for the next year. But even on a micro level, having a nightly gratitude practice has been huge for me, because every day I'm reflecting on not just what I accomplished. Like, at the end of the day, today I can say, wow, I had this amazing connection with Zach and we did this podcast together. And I feel really good about the time that we spent. And hopefully people learned something from listening. And that was a great experience. And it's going to go in my gratitude journal. But it could just be like, I also got outside twice today for walks, and I'm in Minneapolis and it's 50 degrees, and that is like relatively warm and mild, and just having the opportunity to go outside. Or I saw the first robin of spring a couple of days ago. It's like, that's going in the gratitude journal. And just being able to focus on what is positive, what's going well, and bringing our attention to that. We know that when we focus on more positivity, that it creates more positivity. So just being grateful for where we're at. And it sounds like you've been able to assess and see how much you're accomplishing. It's like, life's pretty good.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, what always stops me, what I found is probably the best question that I ask, because as a questioner, I've learned how to ask good questions, right? And that's one of the things I teach my clients. How do you ask better questions? Because better questions beget better answers. And a question that I've learned to ask myself, because I always want to do more. It's never enough for me. But when I want to do something else, the question that always comes up in my mind is, yeah, but at what cost? All right, I want to write another article and I want to stay up late. Or I don't feel like I burned enough calories this week. Let's throw in another training session. Sure, that sounds great. But at what cost?
That's a great question.
And it's usually at the cost of sleep, of energy, again, of irritability. And it's like, I don't think that it's worth it. And sometimes I give myself the excuse that, it's just me being lazy. But usually I can reason my way into thinking, no, actually, I should sleep in this morning. I want to jump on the rower for 30 minutes or 45 minutes or do P90X, but the cost is too great. I think I should probably sleep in. And it's taken me a long time to be okay with that.
Yeah, I think that's a great perspective to have. And when clients tell me that they're not doing something because they're lazy, I can always find something else that's happening in their life that's a more important priority. And it's just like, well, obviously this is not the most important priority for you. And maybe you just need to accept that and be okay with it. And then we can decide, what are the priorities and where does your focus need to go? Where does your time and energy need to go now? And having that self-awareness and just being honest with ourselves is a step in the right direction.
Well, speaking of gratitude and gratitude practices, I am completely, supremely grateful that Debbie connected with you in the group and brought you into my world and into the world of all my listeners and readers and followers. Because I think that this is everything that I believe about productivity and about being intentional. And I'm pretty sure we didn't talk about to-do list apps or specific calendar programs or Trello or, like I said, I love the shiny objects, but I don't think that that's what productivity is about. It's about intentionally knowing, what do I want to work towards? What's my why? And being intentional about making sure that your values go on your calendar. So on that note, if somebody's listening today and they've been totally inspired by your work and they think you're a good fit or they want to learn more, how do they find you?
Well, thanks for asking. Actually, just finding me on LinkedIn. I'm really active there. So hopefully you can link that in the show notes. My website is optimaresultscoaching.com.
Yet another thing we have in common.
I know. I thought about that as well. I'm Optima, you optimize. Instagram, Optima Results, Facebook, Optima Results Coaching. And I offer a free strategy session so that if you want to book something for 45 minutes to just hyper focus on one area that you want to see some improvement in, I'm happy to get connected. And then lastly, I have a 6-week online course, which utilizes mindfulness practices, which we didn't talk a whole lot about, but to using mindfulness to be more present and connected and to facilitate focus and time management skills for productivity and work-life balance. So lots of ways that people can get connected with me, and I look forward to connecting with everyone, and I look forward to staying in touch with you. I think you and I will have to connect again down the line and check back and see what's going on in each other's lives.
I couldn't agree with that more. And I can already say that I would love to have you at some point as a guest in my masterminds that I do with my clients. This is a new thing that we're doing where you would essentially, it would be like a podcast interview, but you have a group and it's a town hall conversation. Like I would bring in some of my students that are interested in learning more, and they ask questions and you solve problems. And you would go to the top of my list of an amazing guest to have in one of our next masterminds. So
thank you so much. I appreciate that. I would love that.
Excellent. We're going to make sure to put links to everything so people can find you. They can get the free strategy session, connect with you on LinkedIn. All of it's going to be in the show notes. But on that note, I really am grateful that we connected, and I was so happy to have you here. And I appreciate the free coaching session. That's really what this was about, is I just wanted my own free coaching session because I'm cheap. So I appreciate you doing that for me.
Anytime, Zach.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. Take care.
Before closing up today's show, I would love to ask for just a couple additional minutes of your time and attention to introduce you to one of my new favorite products created by my good friend Kit Perkins, who you may recognize as creator of the Topomat. Here is a brief excerpt from a recent interview that I did with Ergo-Driven co-founder and CEO Kit Perkins, talking about his latest product, New Standard Whole Protein.
I'm into health and fitness generally, but I want it to be simple and straightforward. About a year and a half ago, I started adding collagen into my protein shakes. And man, the benefits were like more dramatic than any supplement I've ever seen. So I thought, if I could just get this down to coming out of one jar and it's ingredients that I know I can trust, and you just put it in water and you don't have to think about it.
When people think of protein powders, they think, well, I don't want to get big and bulky. And that's not what this is about. To me, this is about repair.
So a big part of what we're talking about here is you are what you eat. Your body's constantly repairing and rebuilding, and the only stuff it can use to repair and rebuild is what you've been eating. Unfortunately, as the years have gone by, every day getting out of bed, it's like, 2 or 3 creaks and pops in the first couple steps. And that I thought you just sort of lived with now. But yeah, once starting the collagen daily or near daily, it's just gone. So for us, job 1A here was make sure it's high quality, and that's grass-fed, 100% pasture-raised cows. And then the second thing, if you're actually going to do it every day, it needs to be simple. It needs to taste good.
Well, my goal is that for anybody that is a creative professional like myself that's stuck in front of a computer, number one, they're doing it standing on a Topomat. Number two, they've got a glass of New Standard protein next to them so they can just fuel their body, fuel their brain. So you and I, my friend, one edit station at a time are going to change the world.
And even better for your listeners, with code OPTIMIZE, on either a one-time purchase or that first subscribe and save order, 50% off. So if you do that subscribe and save, that's 20% off and 50% off with code OPTIMIZE. That's a fantastic deal.
If you're looking for a simple and affordable way to stay energetic, focused, and alleviate the chronic aches and pains that come from living at your computer, I recommend New Standard Whole Protein because it's sourced from high-quality ingredients that I trust, and it tastes great. To place your first order, visit optimizeyourself.me/newstandard and use the code OPTIMIZE for 50% off your first order. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Optimize Yourself podcast. To access the show notes for this and all previous episodes, as well as to subscribe so you don't miss future interviews just like this one, don't forget to visit optimizeyourself.me/podcast. And a special thanks to our sponsors Evercast and Ergo-Driven for making today's interview possible. To learn more about how to collaborate remotely without missing a frame and to get your real-time demo of Evercast in action, visit optimizeyourself.me/Evercast. And to learn more about Ergo-Driven and my favorite product for standing workstations, the Topomat, visit optimizeyourself.me/Topo. That's TOPO. And to learn more about Ergo-Driven and their brand new product that I am super excited about, New Standard Whole Protein, visit optimizeyourself.me/newstandard. Thank you for listening. Stay safe, healthy, and sane, and be well.